Well, good morning and welcome to Long Lake near Reading, which is a very exclusive syndicate water, and I'm actually quite privileged to have a ticket on this venue because it's not easy to get a ticket on here. The actual waiting list is very closed, but the reason for that is because it's got some absolute gems in here. It's a nicely stocked water. It's about 10 acres in size with roughly about 60 or 70 fish, including about 6 different 40s, and obviously you can tell from just looking at it, it's not an easy day ticket venue. It's not somewhere that's rammed full of fish, and the fishing on here is actually quite tricky, and it's that particular topic we want to talk about today is tricky fishing. It's fair to say that a lot of lads that are new to carp fishing have probably grown up on day ticket waters, which, to be fair to them, you get yourself a swim and you've usually got a decent head of fish in front of you, and they're not that hard to catch. But what do you do about when you decide to step up and step away from those day ticket waters and try somewhere a little bit different? And this is basically that kind of venue. It's not rock hard, but it's definitely somewhere that you need to try and outthink the fish a little bit, because they've been carp fished for many years. They're not easy to catch, and generally speaking, a good season on a lake like this is about half a dozen or so fish. There are 1 or 2 lads on here that's done a lot better than that, and those are the guys that are, you know, doing something a little bit different, and they're sort of staying one step ahead of the fish. So it's that kind of topic that we're going to take a look at today, is how do you go about trying to fish a tricky water. You know, you're stepping away from those day ticket lakes, and hopefully we're going to give you some idea in how I would approach a venue like this today. So you can probably tell from the intro that this particular piece is not about a fishing session where we start, we catch a few fish and then we go home all happy. It's about fishing tricky waters. But with that said, I want to give you a brief introduction to the swim that I'm fishing at the moment, because I have got the rods out. I'm in a swim that's known as the Sunburn, and I'm at the shallowest end of the lake. And on this particular water, you're only allowed to use 2 rods, and one of them I've got fishing really close in. So that's the reason why we're doing this bit of filming behind the bivvy. And the left-hand rod is a little bit further out, more towards the middle. But I'm fishing very much like you would do normally in the spring, is that I'm looking for the shallower areas of the lake, and I'm not fishing over a great deal of bait. But it's not about tactics I want to start talking about. It's more to do with getting to know the lake and getting to know the way that the fish live in that lake. And to do that, you need to know a little bit about the venue. And I've only been a member on this water a couple of years, and I haven't done many sessions, and I actually haven't been down here much this year. It's actually 3 weeks ago since I was last down here. But I'll talk more about my tactical approach on this kind of water in a moment, because where I want to begin with is by taking a look at the venue. And who better to talk to than the venue owner, who's just turned up, Alan Cooper, and he's going to give us a brief insight into the fish, the lake, and how it fishes.
I've had this lake now for 10 years. It's give you an idea of what it's about. It's about 10, 11 acres in size, and we've got a stock of somewhere around 80 fish at the moment. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to tell, because a few of them go missing for 4 or 5 years at a time, and people think that they've actually died and then they crop back up again. So we've got a head of fish, big fish, probably 2 fish this year that should do 50 pound at some point before the end of the year. There is another 6 or 7 fish over 40 pound, and we've got only a handful. There's probably about 7 or 8 30s in here, but most of those are 35 pound plus at the moment. And we've got another group of younger fish coming through that are now getting to the 28 to 30 pound mark at the right time of year, you know, tail end of the year, November time onwards. So, you know, they've come on very, very well, considering we only stocked 3 20-pounders, a dozen doubles, and then the rest of them were all sort of 8 to 9 pound when they went in. So we've done all right over the course of 10 years. So a good season on here for your average guy that can get out for 3 or 4 nights a month. He generally doesn't fish the winter months as well. You're looking at 6 or 7 fish. That would be a pretty good season. Most of the guys get 3 or 4 fish each year, and you occasionally get a few people that sort of get to 12 to 15 fish in a year, and they've done exceptionally well. This one is tricky because of the depth, and as the name suggests, Long Lake, it is quite narrow. It's sort of 120 yards across at the wide end and only 35 yards across at the narrow end. So the fish know that you're here. If you're not super quiet, you know, you're footfall careful and that type of thing, you let them know that you're here, and then their guard is up, and they generally, what they do is go to the other end of the lake from wherever you are. I don't really like people casting at them very much. So stealth is paramount, really. If you're going to be on a tricky water that's got you know, fish that have been fished for quite a few years, they learn from that. They know when we're fishing for them, and they'll either shut up shop and not feed, or they'll go to somewhere that's quieter on the lake and to avoid the anglers.
So you might have noticed that I've changed swim, and the reason for that really relates to something that Alan was just talking about, and that's about being in tune with the lake. And it's fair to say at the moment I'm not in tune with this venue. I've not fished it for about 3 or 4 weeks now. I've been fishing elsewhere, and when you have a couple of 3 weeks off a lake, it keeps you sort of out of the loop of what the fish are doing. And at the moment I don't know what they're doing. It's only based on a little bit of information that Alan's just said to me about who's been catching from where. And whilst the area that I was in previously, I know it's a good area for big fish, I'd like to catch something on this session, and the area that we're in now, there's some fish definitely in front of here, and I know it's been doing some bites. So the point I'm getting at here is, if you're going to be fishing a tricky venue, it's not just about the rigs and the bait side of things. You know, that's the commercial side of carp fishing. Of course, they're definitely important, but one of the most important parts of fishing a tricky lake is understanding what the fish are doing, knowing where they live, knowing where they are today, you know, because fish can be very active on a big piece of water like this. They might be showing in one area, but they might not be feeding in that area, because when you put any fish under pressure, they obviously react completely different to how they would do if they was in a small tank at home or the garden pond where they're not getting caught. When you start catching fish from an area, they get very spotty. And I know for a fact that on this lake in the past, I've actually just seen a fish now in front of me, which is a decent sign. But I know from fishing this lake in the past that when they start showing in an area, you won't always catch them from there. And I know there's been somebody in this swim quite recently catching some decent fish out of here. So basically the point I'm getting at is I'm full of confidence. I'm not in tune with the lake, but I've had a good walk round and I've found some fish in an area where they know that they've been caught from recently. So there's definitely a good chance that something could happen in this swim. And it's really sort of, as I say, I'm out of the loop, I'm not in tune, but last year I was definitely in tune with this lake. I was knowing what was going on. I know where the fish were getting caught from, and if you can get to the water at least once, maybe twice a week, and get to know what the fish are doing, it's always going to be of great advantage to you when you do eventually go fishing. And last year when I was down here, I was making regular trips and knew what the fish were doing, and it helped me catch some nice fish. And what we're going to do now is just take a look at some footage from last year when I was fortunate enough to catch some of the really, really nice fish out of this lake, including a 45-pound linear. So let's check it out now. What a carp that is. The barbecue zip at 45 pounds. Awesome. Proper buzzing. That is just mega. One of my target carp for the year. Brilliant. It's fair to say that anybody who fishes day tickets on a regular basis, especially newcomer anglers, they get into the habit of chopping and changing things on a regular basis. That's the nature of those kind of venues. You need to be one step ahead of the carp because, you know, the fish have seen everything. So if you're a newcomer that's looking to transition into fishing the trickier venues, and you're used to casting out a rig, leaving it for a couple of hours, and then casting out another rig and chopping and changing things on a regular basis, same with bait, then fishing the trickier venues, it probably won't pay to fish like that. It probably pays a lot, well, I know it actually pays a lot more to be very confident in what you're doing. So the purpose of what I'm trying to say is find a rig and a bait and a tactic that works for you, because on these kind of venues, certainly on here where the carp have seen everything, they don't like lots of casting, they don't like lots of leads flying around, and they certainly don't like lots of chopping and changing. So you're going to endure lots of blank periods on a venue like this, because you've got to sit and wait for those fish to move into the area and start feeding on the baits that you're using. So find yourself a rig that's caught you lots of fish in the past, find a bait that you're confident in, and it's certainly going to lend itself to more successful fishing on a tricky water. Now, you might also find on these kind of venues that some baits become quite established on them. You know, this lake, I know full well from speaking to Alan that he himself introduces a bit of his own bait in here. A lot of the guys that are fishing on the syndicate, they're also in on that bait, and it does tend to do an awful lot more bites than other baits. I've seen this kind of thing happen on lots of different syndicates that are quite tricky. A couple of years ago I saw it on 𝘃𝗵𝗶𝗀 in Shropshire, where one particular bait was catching 3 fish to every one on everybody else's bait. So it is a little bit of a decision maker for you to decide whether you want to jump on the bandwagon and get on that bait, or do something a little bit different. Obviously some lakes it works in favour of one side of the argument, and others it goes with the other one. So it's down to you to decide. Obviously if you are going to go down the route of using your own bait, then a bit of pre-bait is always going to help you. I talked just a few moments ago about the lads on this water introducing an established bait. That obviously does help. It increases the confidence of the fish of getting in on that bait, and obviously it makes it a lot more easier to catch them. And if you're going to be fishing a lake on a regular basis, then the more of your bait that you can get in, obviously it's going to give you a lot more advantages towards catching those fish. So get into the habit of coming down to the lake, even if you can't fish, if it's a local water, of just walking it regularly and introducing a bit of bait in different spots. Try and pick areas that other guys aren't fishing as well, and obviously try to not put too much bait out that's going to interfere with other people. But the more often you put bait in, it's definitely going to help you. But we're going into the first evening that the Carpology guys are down here now, and I'm happy with where the rods are at the moment. I'm very confident that something could happen, because there's fish definitely in the area, and we're in the middle of spring now, and it's always a good time to be on the bank. But if I don't catch anything by the morning, that's not a big problem, because I know that this lake tends to do more bites during the hours of daylight, and you know, that's down to having the right mindset. Rather than getting up in the morning and thrashing the water to a foam and chopping and changing things, I'll be just sitting here waiting and hoping that something happens. But we'll talk more tomorrow about having the right mindset and how that can help you in the long run on a venue like this. So it's the morning after the night before, and you guessed it, nothing's happened. That is the nature of fishing tricky lakes. I kind of predicted it really, because it's how the fishing's been going on here for a lot of lads. Not all of them, because there's a couple of lads who are catching quite consistently, but I think that's down to them getting the bait established on a water like this. And this is one of the hardest parts about fishing tricky venues, is that I'm not really much of a swearer, but I'm going to say it, there can be a bit of a head fish sometimes, and dealing with the head fish side of carp fishing on tricky lakes can be very, very difficult, especially if you're a newcomer coming into the sport, because you're not patient, you're not able to process what's going on, and you're not able to sit there and endure the blank periods that do happen. You know, that is part of carp fishing, especially nowadays when you go on social media. Everybody seems to be sort of interested in putting pictures up every 5 minutes. You know, it's almost like that carp fishing is very, very easy, when it's not. You know, social media can be a real misrepresentation of what carp fishing is like. It's almost like, well, he's catching, I need to be catching, why am I not catching? Just calm down a little bit, just take in what's going on the lake that you're fishing, and ignore a lot of the stuff on social media, because if you're going to fish a tricky lake, blanking is part of the game, and it's then about processing what's going on. As I said earlier on, understanding the lake, understanding what's going on. It is so difficult to endure blank periods and not sit there and go, is there something wrong with my rigs? Is there something wrong with my baits? And as we talked about before, you've got to be on these lakes with stuff that you know that works. You know it's in the right area, you just got to wait, and sometimes they can get very spotty where they're only picking up baits in certain areas, and that seems to be the case at the moment on here, is that unless you're in that area with that bait, it's pretty tricky to catch them. But it's not going to stop me coming, because that is what is the carp angler in me, is that I've got a goal in mind, I know what I want to catch, and I just got to follow it through. I could quite easily go and fish somewhere else and have a few trips away and but my mind would always be thinking about being back on here, and you know, if I want to catch a particular fish, then I've just got to follow it through right the way until the end goal is achieved. And we've got all season, it's early season still now, but if you do decide to go from the day ticket waters onto the tricky lakes and you start having a few difficult periods, at the end of the day, carp fishing is about enjoying yourself. It's not about chasing what other people are doing. It's not about a particular goal or whatever. It's about enjoying what you're doing. If your goal is to just sit here and enjoy the environment, and in fact today I've had a chat with one of the older members on here, Des, who's been around carp fishing a long time, and he's got a very stressful job. For him, it's about sitting here and enjoying and relaxing and getting away from his work. It's not just about catching fish, but at the end of the day we do want to catch fish, but it's about processing it in the right way. So if you feel you need to go away and have another go on a day ticket lake, then go and do that. You know, it's about what's right for you, and tricky lakes aren't like day ticket waters. There's a lot of things going on, and the more experienced the carp angler that you are, the more you're able to process what is actually happening and how you can try and turn those blank periods into catches. But I'm definitely going to be back here. I'll be back next week, probably the week after as well. I've got a few more weeks that I can keep coming down here consistently and trying to put the pieces together and hopefully get that end goal, which is one or two of these decent 40s that are in here. But I hope you've enjoyed watching what we've been talking about today. It's only been short, and as I said, it's not a session piece. It's more to do with the next level of carp fishing, which is about trying to catch those tricky fish. So go out there and enjoy it, and hopefully we'll see you with some nice fish on the bank very soon.